slave to the Marvel Cinematic Universe that I am, I watched WandaVision on Disney Plus as it was released. The highlight for me was episode 6, All New Halloween Spooktacular. Not for anything that happened in the plot, but instead for how it was a direct and faithful tribute to Malcolm in the Middle. However, when I watched their theme song parody, something was missing. Something that left me with the same question every time I started an episode of Fox's angsty early 2000s family sitcom.
Yes, no, maybe.
Who is this mysterious anime man? Plenty of videos have already broken down the origins of the bizarre clips found in this intro, which is set to the song Boss of Me by They Might Be Giants, and most feel like the kind of old school cable filler that Malcolm in the Middle's family would watch. Imagine my surprise when I found out that the yes, no, maybe, I don't know man came from a 1998 anime called Nazca, or Dimensional Movement of Nazca. It ran for a total of 12 episodes and was created by Yoshihiko Inamoto. It's named after the real-life Nazca lines in southern Peru. They're shallow trenches that form over 1,000 geoglyphs of birds, animals, and humans. But ask a scientist what they represent or where they came from, and they'll say,
I don't know.
Naturally, this series concerns high schoolers who study kendo and find out that they're reincarnated Incan warriors. Sure, they all live in Japan and used to look like overdressed wrestlers, but there's constant flashbacks to their original incarnations, where they all look exactly the same. I guess they're operating on the logic of cartoon episodes where the same characters exist in different historical periods. It's like if Phineas and Ferb was all about the steampunk episode where Perry the Platypus is a swan.
Oh, there you are, Swery the Swan.
They kind of offer an explanation of one of the later episodes, but it doesn't go beyond this brief moment. Besides, a piece of animation not being historically accurate is something I can suspend my disbelief for anyway.
Asuka has something in common with Nazca in Peru? The names sound similar, but one's in Japan, the other's in South America.
The Ainu of Japan and the Inca show many similarities. Some archaeologists believe that they are originally of the same race and culture, spread across Asia, North and South America.
The conflict is kicked off when young Kyoji sees a vision of his teacher Tate as an Incan warrior, shattering the ribs of his opponent. The crowd witnessing this severe injury reacts appropriately. Unfortunately, Tate and Kyoji used to try to kill each other a few centuries ago, so once the master awakens his student's sleeping spirit, he makes it clear that you and I are enemies now. The first few episodes have Kyoji and Tate's fiancée Yuka become allies and travel to Peru seeking answers, but they take a wrong turn and accidentally end up in a pre-rendered PlayStation 1 cutscene. While the pair wander around Peru, the majority of which is apparently a giant desert, Tate begins to recruit Kyoji's peers to his cause, which is evil. First up is Daimon, who is a selfish dweeb until the plot forces him to realize how much of a selfish dweeb he is. Towards the end, he takes off his shirt and he is ripped. I think that was the most shocking twist in the whole story. Actually, for this video, I think I'm gonna do something different for reaction shots. These Malcolm in the Middle promotional photos will do a much better job expressing my moment-to-moment emotions. I can't forget to mention Shiogami, who you know is the best character because he gets to swear the most. He looks like a Yakuza member, he sounds like a chain smoker, and talks like he's going to steal your lunch money. For the first 8 episodes, all Shiogami does is attempt to epically murder his bros without a motivation, and gets all the best lines while doing so.
All those people in the town are
probably very dead, I imagine. Pathetic. Being saved by a woman.
Even when he does get a motivation, basically nothing about him changes. The dude is out for blood no matter what, and I love how the show always treats him so seriously. Shiogami also has a sister named Alila, who is a forgettable servant to Tate until it's revealed that she wants her sleeping soul to be reawakened so that she can have an excuse for wanting to date her brother.
Oh, word?
Ugh, this is making me uncomfortable. I feel like I should be watching something more wholesome. Maybe another Fox show, like Arrested Development?
George Michael had been nursing an impossible crush. It was on his cousin, maybe.
Whoa! Let's get back on topic.
Look, it's Malcolm in the Middle.
Alongside Yuka, Kyoji is assisted by Mountain Dan and Seino. Despite his name, Dan is a pretty down-to-earth guy, and he plays off the more serious characters pretty well. He's even got one of the funnier line readings in the whole show.
Ah, you went to South America, didn't you? How was the coffee?
I like him a lot. I would totally wear a t-shirt that says, "I'm a fan of Mountain Dan." Also, I know he looks a little like Brock from Pokemon. They both enjoy snacking on jelly-filled donuts too.
These donuts are great. Jelly-filled are my favorite. Nothing beats a jelly-filled donut.
Seino is only brought in to fill out the team. He's introduced as the Bug Kid, because every squad has one, and he's able to summon black butterflies to swarm opponents. It's symbolism, I guess. Going back to the vocal direction, here's what Seino sounds like.
All the insects in Mount Asuma are... Ah! But you're still hurt. You can't. Have you heard of Atahualpa?
What?
Yeah, the voice acting in the English dub isn't very strong. For most of the actors, this was one of their first, or only, anime roles, so I don't blame them for having weak performances. There's moments where I'm not really sure what they were going for that are marvelous to watch out of context.
Oh. Yes, that was the beginning of our dark fate.
To my surprise, the newscaster who briefly appears in episode 9 was voiced by Greg Weisman, the showrunner of Gargoyles, Young Justice, and The Spectacular Spider-Man. It turns out that in the late 90s and early 2000s, Weisman voice-directed the English dub of 3x3 Eyes, which was produced by Pioneer Entertainment alongside Nazca. This explains why a few actors from Gargoyles appeared in some of their dubs, like Thom Adcox, the voice of Shiogami, my beloved. According to Weisman, Rick Simone, who played Dan, is responsible for producing the opening title sequences for various primetime series. And according to him, that is why Nazca is in the intro to Malcolm in the Middle. Turns out that the answer to my question was buried in a 21-year-old forum post all along. As for the original context of these clips, that brings us to episode 3.
It's time for the moment you've been waiting for.
The skateboarding kid belongs to a gang of street punks that show up out of nowhere to beat up Daimon. Although he was a jerk to Dan earlier, so he kind of deserved what was coming to him.
Relax. Eat a cookie. Here.
I am not very hungry. Excuse me.
As more souls are reawakened, we get a number of flashbacks to the previous incarnations of the characters in Incan times. Honestly, I kinda tuned out during these bits, cause they're often flashy sequences with little plot significance. It's like that infamous shot from the Malcolm in the Middle episode Reese Comes Home, where you could see the stand-in for Dewey before they fixed it and cropped him out. The show's telling me that this Dewey is supposed to be Dewey Prime, but to me, that just ain't Dewey. Also, all the Incan versions of the cast have different names that are used interchangeably from the start, which made it harder to tell who's who, especially when the series began. At the end of this one, Kyoji returns home from Peru, and he's just on a little stroll in the rain, minding his own business when suddenly there's a man behind him and he's got a blade! Oh no, Kyoji! Kyoji is dead, except for the 9 other episodes in which he's alive! He never brings this scene up again, and there it is, baby! Shiogami was the mysterious anime man all along. Mystery solved. Unfortunately, that's about as good as it gets. So, episode 4 introduces more reawakened spirits, and all these kids need haircuts. Both Yuka and Kyoji seemingly accept that the Tate they knew is gone for good, and they're both depressed about it. This is when it hit me that I had 8 more episodes of this to go, and that realization hit me hard.
Well, I think she bears a resemblance to you.
No, she doesn't! In episode 5, Tate and the boys have really gone and done it now. They've begun to tap into the great power of Iriatese and destroyed an entire mountainside town, killing tens of thousands in the name of cleansing the world and shipping it to fit their own ambitions. With all the heroes and villains converging in one place, it's time for Kyoji's team to stack their abilities together and show Tate what happens when you reject the past and choose your own destiny. After all,
Future's now, old man.
At least, that's what I think the intended message is. At this point in Nazca, it's hard to tell. Dan and Seino casually reject conforming to the past, simply because they don't wanna, while Yuka and Daimon struggle to choose their alignment when that conflicts with their previous lives. The bulk of episode 6 has the whole cast square off, and for the most part, both sides are evenly matched. It's like it doesn't matter how much someone's past incarnations differ from their present selves until the plot says it matters.
Ugh. I don't like to hit women, but you forced me to!
Tate realizes that he needs Yuka by his side to finally release Iriatese, so he uses ancient memories to manipulate her into switching sides. The dialogue found here is a little on the nose.
I accept everything about you.
Now, Tate's a terrorist and a genuinely horrible person. It's an uncomfortable plot twist, especially because any agency that the female lead had is completely removed. But I guess it does make this villain more intimidating. Tate has truly surpassed the point of redemption, and wait a minute, why does this image look all smug and sarcastic?
This time I'm going to beat you. This time I won't let you take her away from me!
This line here gives off the implication that Kyoji has a crush on Yuka, but neither this, nor the fact that Tate thinks genocide is A-okay, is enough for Yuka to question siding with her purple-haired fiancé. It even takes 2 episodes for the rest of the world to recognize Tate's magical murdering tour. It's not like Yuka's morals suddenly take a 180, as she's pressured to betray Kyoji over multiple encounters, but never wants to directly hurt him and his friends. However, Yuka basically loses her personality when defecting, mainly becoming a vehicle for exposition. In fact, lots of side characters get the shaft. Dan, Ilila, Kyoji's family and other friend who added nothing to the plot so I neglected to mention them until now, and Seino. After all, someone's gotta stay behind to open the magic portal that takes all the important people to the final battle. It feels like the Incan flashbacks take up too much screen time, where one party spends most of an episode regrouping, so the heroes and villains don't face each other until the final minutes. Having more chapters that directly lead into each other would have helped streamline the plot, cause there's elements that are either unnecessary or underdeveloped, or sometimes both. Episode 9 has Tate and his terrible trio recruit a new member, a priest who can steal other people's souls after healing them. That's a rad concept that enhances the conflict, and I was excited to see it fleshed out beyond this introduction, but then he turned into another vehicle for exposition, and I was sad. It's no wonder that I started to find this character relatable when she popped up.
I am going to die.
If there's any part of Nazca I recommend you personally seek out, it's the soundtrack. The series doesn't have an ever-changing score, instead using heavily repeated cues to set the tone, but the compositions have loads of variety. The opening contains an operatic rendition of a classic Bach tune in G minor, foreshadowing how Dewey's love of classical music would lead him to write an opera in the season 6 episode, Dewey's Opera. What a masterful piece of continuity. The weirdest inclusions are tracks that sound like they fit right into a very specific 90s video game. There's a confused version of Ocarina of Time's boss battle theme. There's a variation on the Final Fantasy IV theme that sounds like a Nintendo 64 game. And then there's a bootleg of Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairies. You know, from Tetris. Nazca's composer wrote the score to the Professor Layton anime film and arranged orchestral versions of Final Fantasy VI's music, so clearly he was familiar with the world of Japanese game OSTs. Maybe these sound-alikes were the result of temp tracks being closely followed. Who knows? The official soundtrack features plenty of music that didn't pop up in the dub I watched, but it excluded the ending theme. I like how it nicely transitions into the credits, but the instrumentation reminds me a little too much of a 90s educational VHS tape. Holidays for Children type beat. Everybody loves a holiday. Everybody loves a celebration. One thing that Nazca certainly does better than Malcolm in the Middle is animation. Sure, it may be a live-action show, but lest we forget the promo they did for Fox's animation domination block.
No way. Cool, I know. Isn't this great, boys?
What
have you done?
Does my butt look big?
I both love and hate this.
Hello, we're cartoons.
Silence, boy genius!
Nothing about the character designs feels super unique to this show. The few environments they have that are rendered in CGI are constantly reused, and plenty of shots take distracting shortcuts to not animate the characters. They pull the camera really far back, focus on the sky as someone walks, or just hold on a still pose, which happens in episode 10 for 25 whole seconds. I don't blame the animation team for cutting corners here and there, especially after I looked into how this production was organized. With this being a decades-old Japanese product, I wasn't able to track down any interviews or behind-the-scenes info, so the credits were all I had to go off of. A few years back, my friend Red, formerly RoboBuddies, did a solid video explaining why the animation in the anime Sonic X was flawed from a studio standpoint. And lo and behold, these two shows have a lot of similarities with how their productions were structured. And yes, I am talking about Sonic in yet another video. If Malcolm can shoehorn him in, then so can I. While there were plenty of seasoned animation directors behind Nazca, both series outsourced the in-between animation. That's the responsibility of drawing poses that fill in gaps between the main keyframes to 16 different studios instead of like 3 or 4. And that's across only 12 episodes compared to Sonic X's 78. This reeks of cost cutting, and could have created plenty of communication issues between everyone involved. Only a single in-between checker, that's the person who makes sure that the in-between drawings are on model and consistent between key poses, was on staff, as opposed to the standard number of 6 or 7. I imagine that it was a nightmare for one person to approve the work of all these different studios on a tight schedule. But for all I know, there were other factors at play that I can't recognize from just looking at a list of names. At the end of the day, Nazca is miles more on model and visually inspired than the majority of Sonic X, despite their similar weaknesses production-wise. They may share a habit of having underwhelming, repetitive, brief, and shoppily animated fights, but the former has the upper hand by feeling more cinematic. All things considered, this series doesn't look half bad, and at the very least, most of the staging is solid. If you're willing to sit through some decent material, you'll find great-looking dolly zooms, first-person shots, and even a motif with Daimon. A lot of his shots are framed through an eye, or play with the reflection in his glasses, so it makes sense that his arc is about Tate's illusions of grandeur literally clouding his views on what's right and wrong. I also dig the numerous scenes set against a sunrise or sunset, making certain moments much more dynamic, even if nothing is actually happening. The exception is episode 9, where there's a little glow around the characters that looks like they were edited onto a background with a green screen, but that could just be an artifact of the low-quality DVD rip I watched. Nazca isn't currently available to stream or download, and if you want to own it, you'll have to make do with the out-of-print home releases that split 12 episodes into 4 separate discs. For the sake of keeping it accessible and high quality, I hope this anime gets re-released at some point. Same goes for Malcolm getting a full physical release in the United States. Although if that ever happens, I'd want its own Japanese dub to be included as well.
電話以外の慰めを見つけるしかないんじゃない？もしもし？
By episode 10, things began to heat up, with a couple of atmospheric and somber scenes, so I was getting into it. After lots of recruiting and scheming, Tate and Tate's friends are ready to make their evil ambitions a reality, just as Daimon starts to see the error of his ways. He ends up helping Kyoji heal, tries to double-cross Tate, and even sacrifices himself to protect his friend. He may have been a jerk at first, but Daimon honestly had the most compelling character arc in the whole, never mind he's still alive somehow. At least he fared far better than Yuka. The most notable thing she does towards the end is appear naked in one of Kyoji's visions. Yay, girl power! During the penultimate episode, most of the principal characters are transported back in time for reasons that are never explained. And Tate sees this as an opportunity to rewrite the future. Finally bringing the present to the past is a natural way to frame the final battle. Kyoji and Tate's climactic duel has plenty of impressively detailed and fluid shots, but I thought it was a little too frantic and hard to read. Did he win?
I don't know.
This showdown is what all 12 episodes have been building to, but I feel like I've already seen it 12 times because almost every shot of a character used in the intro originated here. Over the course of the fight, Kyoji seemingly has a change of heart towards his opponent.
I'm going to kill you.
5 minutes later.
I can't. I won't do this. After all this, I still love and respect you, Sensei.
Now it's previously made clear that Kyoji ultimately wants to help Tate overcome the darkness that's taken control of him. But just like the unclear extent of his affection towards Yuka, their mentorship before the inciting incident of the series is barely focused on for more than a brief moment. So it isn't obvious that there's some good left in Tate outside of when Kyoji makes that claim. Kyoji was moved to spare Tate because he admitted to his mistakes, but putting all these semi-successful plans to cleanse humanity aside, he literally calls Kyoji a fool for believing in him. Then, all of a sudden, Tate leaps into the air and sacrifices himself to stop Iretese from being released. He takes Shiogami with him, which is probably for the greater good, but come on, all he wanted to do was kill Kyoji. He obviously deserved to live.
Come on, get up!
There's no dialogue after Tate leaves the picture, so we don't get to hear anyone reflect on his decision to stop his own evil plan, but the lighting and bittersweet score frame this as a heroic moment. I suppose this reinforces the overarching theme of breaking away from the past, but I don't think it justifies the redemption of a truly despicable villain like Tate. Now I know what it's like to not understand the ending of Steven Universe. If you want an animated series that handled this type of complicated student-teacher dynamic much better, go watch Season 1 of Invincible on Amazon Prime. It's got better written drama, fight scenes that last more than a minute, and characters that look straight out of King of the Hill. What more could you want? When the survivors return to the present, they regroup and mourn their losses. But that's about it. Not every show needs to wrap up with a regular show We Can Be Heroes montage, but after literally fighting to save their future, a flash forward like that could have worked here. Instead, the series ends on a lazy cliffhanger that recycles footage from the end of episode 1.
Then, a peaceful world had been restored. And though everything seemed the same as it had been before, something had changed. Something...
I don't know if plans for another season ever fell through, but Nazca missed out on the opportunity to tell a story with a strong beginning and end. It's kind of ironic that despite running for a whopping 151 episodes, Malcolm in the Middle arguably had a more satisfying conclusion. Everything was against it too. Over time, they added a pointless baby to the family, many characters had reduced roles or outright disappeared, the cynical child actors became less charming as they grew up, and they increasingly favored wacky scenarios over grounded stories. And yet, some of the last episodes they produced brought the main cast to their natural conclusions. About 15 years have passed since the series finale aired, and the speech Malcolm's mom gives to her son before he graduates high school not only justifies his character, but also sums up what made this show so relatable for multiple generations.
You know what it's like to be poor, and you know what it's like to work hard. Now you're gonna learn what it's like to sweep floors and bust your ass and accomplish twice as much as all the kids around you. And it won't mean anything because they will still look down on you. And you will want so much for them to like you, and they just won't. And it'll break your heart. And that'll make your heart bigger and open your eyes, and finally you will realize that there's more to life than proving you're the smartest person in the world.
The lack of a consistent human element or believable characters definitely contributed to why Nazca fell so flat for me. It may have had some inspired concepts and visuals behind it, but things got too caught up in fantasy and flashback elements for me to stay invested. I don't think it did anything special enough to justify being watched outside of its connection to a boomer show, literally. Some moments were fun, or unintentionally funny, but I didn't feel like there was a strong purpose behind this story or this cast. I was bored throughout most of my viewing, and I came out feeling disappointed. You know, even though my expectations weren't high in the first place.
I expect nothing, and I'm still let down.
After the release of Nazca, its creators went on to work on a bunch of stuff that I've never heard of and will never watch, while the anime was adapted into a manga by Akira Himikawa. They're the female artist duo that's adapted the Legend of Zelda games into manga for over 20 years. Apparently, compressing 12 episodes into 2 books prepared them for translating the stories of the modern Zelda games into print. Unfortunately, these volumes never got an English localization, but I did snag a copy of the second volume. Oh wait, this is the Cinemanga. Sorry, I always get these confused. Hey, this one has story arcs too. I'm sure that the Nazca fans won't take too kindly to my review, all 10 of them, but ultimately, I had fun watching something outside of my wheelhouse and discovering who the final boss of me was. With how easy it would have been to edit out some of the risque content, this probably could have aired on Toonami back in the day. And I wonder what its legacy would have been like if it got popular before Malcolm in the Middle premiered. If you've seen this obscure anime, either dubbed or subbed, I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments, as well as if you've seen any other live-action shows or movies with out-of-place references to animation.
Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Maybe there's secrets hidden in the other theme songs made by They Might Be Giants, like the ones for Higglytown Heroes or Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. At the end of the day, the question remains, should you watch Nazca? Well, yes and no. Maybe? I don't know. Can you repeat the question?
Life is unfair.